Okay, well, welcome everyone. I am Edwin, and this is the Long Overdue, which is a show about libraries. And as always, each episode will feature a special guest in a short conversation where we get to focus on Sul Ross, the library, and beyond. Today's guest is Kendall Craig, our Executive Director of Title V, the Frontier Student Experience, and Title III. He's been at Sul Ross coming on 20 years this December. Craig, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. It's unfortunate that Jocelyn is no longer going to be here with us. I'm sure the back and forth would have been great.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, she'd probably get me with some good zingers.
But yeah, you know what? We'll manage. It'll still be fun, still be informative, and all that good stuff in between.
Sure.
So how are you doing today, Kendall?
Well, I'm doing fantastic, but it's always fantastic to be able to spend a little bit of time with wonderful people.
And it's honestly great to have you on the podcast because you were one of the first people to express your love for it and how much you really enjoyed it. Like,
well,
you were one of the first people who came out to us and told us that you were a big fan of it. So,
and to be honest, that's kind of shocking to me because for what it's worth, there's been a lot of really wonderful kind of word on the street, but I'm also not clear if, no one's really fully adapted from, I guess, what we could call post-COVID impacts and everything. So I don't know if anyone knows how to schedule time for themselves to accidentally have a nice accident. If it wasn't for Mr. Parsons or somebody who had made a plug about it to remind me, I might not have remembered. But then I just sat and devoured them because they're talking about some of my favorite things, including Sul Ross, but also, of course, library services and also just things that are timely a little bit. Yeah, but it's a wonderful thing, and I've heard only positive things. But that's the reason why I laid it on so thick. It's really nice, really good.
Well, I'm glad we were able to provide all that for you, and I'm glad you took so much enjoyment out of it. And obviously, I'm very grateful, and I'm very glad for everybody else who's been taking enjoyment out of the podcast, all thanks to Jocelyn's initiative to create said podcast. So let's go ahead and get this going. What do libraries mean to you, Kendall?
This is fun, and just so the home audience knows, I was presented with this question early, but I hadn't really fully thought about it. The libraries for me are kind of interesting. It's almost like a definition of science, which is something that's near and dear to me too. But libraries are interesting because they're not just a repository for information, but they're also a means of access.
Definitely.
And help to sort of set a pace and also a language for getting at certain kinds of information, and especially for folks that are in between ways to approach the world or getting involved in the first time. It's a wonderful structure to get familiar with because it allows for things to be accessible that, and unfortunately, as a young person, I wasn't even aware could exist. When I first saw a huge dictionary on a big podium and I don't even remember what city this was, that was shocking to me. Why would you have a book that big?
Exactly.
And being able to touch those kind of things is huge.
No, and I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, there's still people who maybe are a little bit lost in trying to figure out where they want to go through in life, which direction they want to take. And the libraries provide that great sense of direction because there's so many different subjects. It's like you said, it's just this massive collection of like, well, what if I want to try this? What are people's experiences with that? And they'll find collections of people's experiences in that specific field that they may be curious about. So it's definitely 100% agree with your view on what libraries are.
I can't wait to start using a library. It'll be a good thing for everybody involved.
Well, luckily you have a library almost right next door to your office.
That's right.
There you go.
So convenient. That works out perfect.
So with this in mind, what does our library mean to you?
So this is another question that I didn't think about in advance, but it means everything. Yeah. To a large extent, the whole concept of university to me is shaped by library. By having the resources that are somewhat asynchronous to persist alongside real-time and asynchronous lectures and these things, it creates its own seed of culture. If there's an idea of civilization that actually works for me, it includes notions of university and library. So Sol Ross for me, and I don't mean to lay this on too thick, but just as wonderful as the specialized laboratories or whatever, the library is Sol Ross. Some of the most wonderful, weird conversations I ever had involved interlibrary loan, where we try to pull a document, I think through the Pegasus service at the time. So there were multiple librarians in multiple places trying to find a Norwegian endosymbiotic text that was related to a parasitic worm, Scourgeabinoptera phrenosoma, I believe.
Whoa, what?
Yeah.
That must have been quite the adventure trying to pull that out for you then.
It was, and part of the irony is, even though I couldn't understand a word of the text, the diagrams were fantastic.
Yeah.
And as we all know, books should be solely judged on the basis of the quality of the pictures. I think I just did my part.
Most definitely. And honestly, yeah, I like that you brought that up, that libraries are what make a university, because like when you think of a university, you either think of those long, big lecture halls with like the rising seats, or you think of their library. You think of like scholars and academics walking through, having side conversations, pulling books out. So I think you're absolutely right. I think a library is exactly what makes a university, because I mean, without the library, it's kind of just there.
Some folks I think have individual experiences that can be flavored by anything. Certainly by excellent mentoring by a colleague or an instructor or a professor, staff member. But libraries are also just a really great place to retreat.
Yeah.
If you need to regroup or re-energize on a point, you can't pick a better place. The environment, it's always inviting, no matter what iteration or attempt is going on with styles, and then you're always surrounded by wisdom.
Yeah,
I mean, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly.
I have done a lot worse. So,
and you're absolutely right. It provides that much needed like comfort with whether you're just doing work or you just need a place to like really think about anything that may be on your mind. And like, let's say you're working and you need a distraction. The library provides all of those great topics and books that you can be like, you know what? I want to look into it just for a little bit, see what I find. And it provides like an academic distraction, essentially.
Completely. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So with all this in mind, what has been your history with libraries?
So, I guess I kind of hinted at some of it. At one point in a former life, I dealt an awful lot with focused research. One of the things that's really great about Sol Ross is that, of course, it's for a natural historian, it's right smack dab in the middle of a huge amount of, we'll just say, non-fully explored environments and flora and fauna, the whole biota factor alone, that are wide open. And so this particular library has done me a number of wonderful services in terms of providing a bridge to some extremely obscure kinds of information. It also was sort of just a communication nexus for a while with part of the horned lizard stuff that we were doing back in the day. We also had a prolonged remote sensing project for many years, and also ephemeral streams out here in the desert. You had a lot of very strange biology going on, and it always came back to the library. So if I was to characterize my best use, it might have been that. In terms of my own personal bias, I always liked finding mystery stories when I was little. That was such a huge thing to get to go to a library and basically pull from a library. Of resources.
Yeah, so I mean that's always fantastic to hear that. Not only was it a great escape for you when you were a kid with all these mystery books, but it helped you and assisted you with all of this research you were doing in your adult life up to now as well.
Yeah. So it's bridged all those chapters.
It's created that great bridge, and it's provided you with like such a rich and fun history with libraries where you can say, yeah, like I enjoy a library.
I have no doubt that's a big piece of it. By being able to lock in on the idea that libraries are accessible, that's one big thing right there. But also that they were rewarding, that they were a fun place to go to. I'm not sure that's how everybody necessarily imprints first, especially if they don't actually get to set foot on one. You know, it's one of those things that I think has to be a little tactile first, and then figure out how it can make selfish best sense to the individual. And then they'll be surprised. They'll stumble into something else they didn't even know that was available.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. Going into a library for the first time ever, it can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many options, so many books, and you don't know, oh my God, where do I even start? What do I want to do? And that probably pushes people away. But then that's where the librarians come in.
Yes.
You ask them, you're like, hey, look.
Stewards.
Exactly. One way to put it like that.
Shepherds.
Yeah. Shepherds, exactly. Like, you tell them, like, look, you know what? I don't know what I want to look into. Like, oh, well, what are you interested in? It's like, oh, well, I like mystery. Oh, we have a great mystery section over here. Oh, I like bugs. Oh, we have a great entomology section over here. So on and so forth.
Yeah.
So and then once you delve into it, like you said, it's this huge reward for you because you'll get to explore that topic you wanted to first come into, but then you ask yourself, what else can I find?
Yes.
You know, it becomes like this digging for treasure almost.
Yeah, because of that facilitation, because of the expertise that you and others provide, there's an immediate gratification aspect, which I think in the modern world, I think that can get missed because that is what we all seem to be getting geared toward is how can I do this in the easiest way possible? Yes. Well, a lot of that's already facilitated through with the models, granted, that are in flux and changing all the time, but that's what that crew does, is facilitate. So I think there's something real neat about that.
No, you're absolutely right. Nowadays, with modern technology and modern viewpoints, people expect that instant reward, instant gratification type of thing. But when it comes to like books, you have to remember that you have to stay with it because that reward you're looking for, it's a little bit longer, but it's definitely worth it if it's something that you yourself picked for a topic that you're really interested in.
Yeah, there is an investment.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, I'm a big advocate of the lack of literacy, but anything that changes that as a trend is also acceptable.
Definitely. So. Most definitely. So with your history, what libraries mean to you and everything, what is the coolest library that you have visited?
Well, okay, so this is a trick question, right? So one library I was in that was really an abbreviated library, but I really enjoyed it. And indirectly, it was part of a Sol Ross function that actually brought me on the scene. There was a little repository set at the Missouri Botanical Gardens that was real cool.
Okay.
And I've been in a number of libraries that were cool. There was one of the libraries at A&M that was cool. I had good moments at Sol Ross in a part of the library that was cool. I enjoyed bowling in a library one time, but we won't go into details on that.
Wait, really?
It may or may not have happened.
Okay.
But the upshot is that had more to do with just the experience parts of it. They're at the Midland has a community library, I believe, and so this is before any of their renovation effort or whatever, but I really enjoyed a cool thing that even our local library here in town in Alpine had, which was where it just looked like a bunch of converted shelving from someone's house.
Okay.
So you kind of got the impression that, wow, this is a whole section just dealing with things that I like.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence or mystery novels or whatever they were, but all in one spot, and all of them looked kind of like loved resources. They were all worn to a certain extent. There's just something about that I, for myself, has always been a very attractive idea.
Okay.
And so just being in those kind of places where you know everyone is there for a reason and likes having those resources around in an environment that's strangely comfortable because of the sort of lived-in look. That was very romantic to me.
Okay.
Even in local libraries. So.
Yeah, like you're absolutely right. that lived-in look adds even more to that sense of, oh, this is a place where I can relax.
It can be accessible to me. I can relax here. This is something that's not unobtainium.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a very like rigid place where it's like, oh, I'm here to just do research. Like, no, you're here to unwind, pick a book out, enjoy the rest of your day however you want to spend it here.
Now, I have been told to be quiet in a library many times. So many times. And
the classical librarian.
Yeah, I think they might have even been like, shh. And I do owe apologies to everyone who ever did that.
You have a list of like libraries you have to apologize for.
I think all of them. All of them in the continental United States probably, and one in Hawaii probably need to make special reparations.
They have like a picture of you that says, please keep in mind you may have to shush this man.
Immediately seize his card, shred card on site. It's probably for the best.
So, with all these libraries you visited, if you could create your own library, what would your dream library look like?
Well, just as a practical consideration, probably a large statue of myself standing right in the middle of it, holding up a book, and like all the planets in our local solar system just dangling off the edge of it. Something modest, something with broad appeal.
Something inconspicuous, yes.
Probably just something with more stacks. I love the idea of a labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that delicate balance between some horrible monster that might be in there to get you, but also comfortable spaces, places, little nooks and crannies you could get lost in. Maybe the whole place floods if you take too long in the nonfiction. I don't know.
So your library is essentially a dungeon for adventurers.
Maybe. I'm not sure anyone should get out okay, though. I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
That's a very challenging caprice.
You heard it first. If you go to Kendall's Dream Library, be prepared to fight for your life.
Yikes. Yeah, maybe.
So this one is always a little bit difficult for people, but what would you say is your favorite book?
My favorite book. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of on the semi-literate side. I'm a huge fan of Arturo Perez Reverte, who does a bunch of neat sort of intrigues and mystery things.
Okay.
He's responsible for the adaptation of a Johnny Depp movie called is it called Club Dumas? The book is Club Dumas. It's called The Ninth Gate. It's really spooky. So
okay.
Ask your parents before you watch that one. But I'm really fond of that of that author's work in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he's Spanish, and and I really liked a book of his called The Flanders Panel that deals with one of those sort of art intrigue things. And I don't want to offend any Dan Brown fans, but this is another level stuff. For those of you that like plots, that might be a cool thing to check out.
Okay. Sounds very interesting and intriguing, definitely. Well, to bounce off of that question now, what are you reading now? What book has your attention right now?
Well, as you know, Edwin, I'm anti-literacy, but other than horrible education management things, I am reading a kind of a mystery story. I think it's called like the King's. Gosh, I can't even think of what it's called. Mm-hmm. I'm one of these people that has a stack of books by the bed, and I start them, and I don't actually read because I don't. I just want to be near the books. I don't.
You just like how the side of them looks, the covers and everything.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That is a problem.
Just admiring the spine of the book, like, oh yeah, that's a nice texture and design.
Yeah, it's a nice design.
Well, from the times that you've been to our library and possibly perused through the stacks, have you found anything in our collection that you would say is notable that someone should definitely look at?
Yes, and thankfully, this is like the only question I really thought about because I'm so scatterbrained and disorganized. But I accidentally did this, and it's because it's something that I don't even remember the first time I encountered this. But when I saw that we had the 3-volume set, and this is going to seem a little non sequitur-ish, but anyway, it's a Dictionary of Mythology. See, I wrote it down. Dictionary of Mythology, Folklore, and Symbols from Gertrude Jobs. It's a very unusual work. And so this is, for those of us that are sort of armchair writers a little bit, this falls in the category of resources. This is from like 1960, 62 or something. And it's a multiple volume set, and it is one of the few experiences in what I would consider the modern age for me where I've just opened up a book and started reading in a resource book and never put it down, essentially. And eventually they kicked me out of the library and told me never to come back. But I did come back later. And it was just such an unusual work. The idea that I found a full volume set here was just too cool. And I spent like a whole afternoon at one point looking through it, making some references. Like a lot of wayward lads, I sort of cut my teeth on old school mythology and folklore things, and I still have a huge weakness for it. And I look for the patterns of those stories woven in everything.
Definitely. I
feel like the best intrigues kind of come out of that stuff that resonates. So I think it's just extremely strangely readable. And I'd love to have a set myself or a digital version or something, but just the idea that it's here and you can smell it is cool.
So is it just limited to one type of mythology, or is it across the board, all mythologies?
I think it's limited for the age that it was put together.
Okay.
But it was such a strange one-off. I would argue it was probably a labor of love.
Okay,
they were trying to stitch some specific literary norms together and some things that had been popular at the time. And that's part of what I liked about it, is it was like one entry is dealing with this, the next one's dealing with zippers. And just how does that tie together? And it's more fun than oh gosh, I can't think of any of the popular ones that are readily available as workstation bonuses, kind of like the thesaurus and the Oxford Dictionary. But you could also have things like encyclopedias of folklore, but they don't go into the kind of strange places that this one does. So again, very, very pleased.
That definitely sounds like something people should at least look into, because it sounds very fun to explore, honestly.
I think so. I'm going to be disappointed if you don't tell me a story about getting in trouble with that book. Some books are dangerous. Something to that effect came up in that Johnny Depp movie.
Some books are definitely dangerous.
Club Dumas. Just saying.
All right. So, Kendall, we're going to move down to our last 2 questions. So the first question I have for you is, what do you love about Sul Ross?
So there are many things I love about Sul Ross. The late Jim Richardson was a huge friend of mine. He was a department head at the time that he had passed away. But all the natural history wonder and everything that he was able to channel for me will always be there in the back of my pocket. And what I really love just about Sul Ross is the concept, which also is part of what the library figures in on, is it is a huge value added for whatever game is being played. For the folks that are able to exploit it, I think that they will always be shocked by what they get out of education as a whole, but specifically here. It's such an eclectic blend of folks doing vodcasts and wild game hunts. You just never know what you're going to get. And I think that is what I like. I like that shock value. I like that lack of balance.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you would find that shock value and lack of balance in a small university, because you think, oh, I've seen it all because it's so small. But then out of nowhere, someone pulls something on you and you're like, oh,
how?
How? When did this happen?
Yeah.
I thought I could hear it all.
Yeah. Why couldn't I? Where are you hiding this?
Exactly. Yeah. So now then, the final question is, what do you love about Alpine?
Alpine, Texas. Alpine is, it's just so beautiful out here. It's a kind of a complicated question because it's hard for me to even tease the two apart.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lovely temperament in general for denizens of far west Texas that includes, I don't know, a calm contemplation value. I think most folks are at least intrigued enough to listen to a pitch, what you have to say. Again, they're shaped by that environment. And so, for example, I don't even have an idea of how you could just grab whatever it is that happens out here and place it as a suburb for Austin. I'm sure it's been tried. Sometimes I think they're trying to turn us into Austin. That's a whole different conspiracy theory.
That's a wild conspiracy, but one of the big ones, definitely.
A lot of people think that, like chupacabras and Sasquatches, is that plural? that they might not be real. And of course, when you come out here, you discover they are.
They are very real in their own
They're all
way.
real. And that's how you know. That's how you know that, that's the kind of bonding that you just can't buy.
Yeah,
Experience.
definitely. Alpine definitely feels and promotes that like closeness, because like something I quickly noticed is that whenever you're driving an Alpine, people will typically wave at you, but then when you start going to like bigger cities, everybody like ignores you.
Yeah.
So,
You're part of the medium.
Yeah.
Not part of the participants.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I just came from Fort Worth.
And you could feel it there too.
Yeah. People still wave at me everywhere. It's just that sometimes they, just have the middle finger and or a gun or fly swatter or something, and
Very, very less friendly waves than you're used to here in Alpine.
Yeah, I didn't think about it, but yeah, much less friendly, much more dangerous.
Much more dangerous indeed. Well, Kendall, that is all I have for you. Is there anything you'd like to ask me?
What are all your many concepts about what you're going to do with your next projects with vodcast and everything? Do you have a bunch of high value craziness?
I don't know yet. I'm
no
still
pressure.
This was definitely my first swimming without floaties into this, so I'm going to see exactly where and how I can take this. I'm definitely going to try and keep having a lot of fun with it for however long it runs.
Well, I hope it runs for nothing longer than 16 years, because that's what I've planned for.
16 years, all right. We will see if we can get it going for 16 years. Well, that is it for today. We are done. Thank you very much for everybody who tunes in and listens and watches. Please be sure to check out the next chapter of The Long Overdue. Thank you very much.